So, my basic claim of fact is whether or not net neutrality should be brought back or not. So, for those of you who don't know what net neutrality is, it's basically these simple principles that that allow access to all websites without being redirected, regardless of the source, without internet service providers discriminating against any specific online source or services or websites. So basically, it prevents blocking websites behind paywalls. It prevents pirate or internet trafficking for different load times. And net neutrality is just basically saying that every internet website is created equal. There's no bias and there's no priority to any. So I'm going to go over how the repeal of net neutrality can alter the way we all use the internet, or even deny you access altogether, how it can put smaller businesses at risk, and how it can actually potentially make people lose their jobs. So someone might think that like every website is created equal. It seems right, and who would think that something's wrong with that? Well, one guy, it seems, Ajit Pai, thinks that net neutrality should be repealed. So his main argument is that we were doing just fine before net neutrality was implied in 2014. But there has to be another reason why he is suggesting it, like instead of just we were doing fine without. There has to be another reason and why he thinks that we'll be just fine without it. So some of his main statements that he makes in his speech to repeal net neutrality is that the main complaint people have with the internet is not and has never been the internet service providers is blocking access to content. It is that they have no access at all, which he states right there that before net neutrality, people didn't complain about being blocked or redirected or anything, and after net neutrality, people still didn't have that complaint. Their only complaint is that they have no access to the internet, which you don't have a computer, you don't have a smartphone, you don't have access to the internet. It's that simple. And then he adds another argument saying that before net neutrality was implemented, a private sector invested over $1.5 trillion to build fixed and mobile networks throughout the United States. And then after it was, after net neutrality was put in, this investment has declined by billions of dollars. But he doesn't give any examples for why this decline was specifically net neutrality. He's in most of his statement, he gives explanations like this, where they don't have too many explanations or reasons why, and I believe that is because he's trying to justify taking away net neutrality, and he's trying to distract from the real reason why he wants to take it away. One of my main reasons is that net neutrality is keeping things in place and accessible to everyone. One of the ways it does this is by keeping every website free to access. And whatever you want to search for is what you get. Without these rules, with net neutrality being repealed, many companies can actually pay to have priority or pay to have you redirected to other websites. And another thing it does is that it doesn't keep rules from keeping all websites free to access. So in an example from New York Times, in other countries, people are actually starting to split up the internet and divide them into paid bundles. Now, Any of you guys use iMessage text every day? A lot. What about Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, social media? And how about they use music apps like Spotify, SoundCloud? All those categories I just listed would be in separate bundles that you would have to buy to use. So, for example, like Skype, messaging, and FaceTime will be in one bundle that you have to pay for. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Pinterest will be in a different bundle that you have to pay for. YouTube, Netflix would be in a separate, and even email apps would be in a separate category that you would all have to pay for separately to be able to use. So that goes into my second point, which getting rid of net neutrality could kill small companies whose main source of getting success is being seen on the internet. Because a lot of businesses actually start off on the internet by posting ads to show people where they're at or what they provide as a business. So stuff like mom and pop businesses, beginning entrepreneurships, stuff like that. They rely on being able to being seen and have quick access to their websites or advertisements on the internet. Under net neutrality, these companies have a fair advantage in comparison to other big companies because their website is as equal as the bigger companies. Without net neutrality, though, a whole other form of competition opens up, which is what company can afford to pay for priority in their website being loaded faster, or being redirected to their website from competing websites. So if you're trying to search up a smaller business and you try going onto their website, you could be blasted with ads saying go to this well-known company who can do the same thing, probably for more. Or if you finally get past all the ads and all the redirecting, their website can be forced to a slower trafficking lane so that everything loads slower. And that leads into my final point, which, like I said, these businesses rely on being seen. So without being seen, they don't get any support. I will leave it off on this quote. I'll leave it off by this quote by Ajit Pai. Americans will still be able to access the websites they want to visit. They will still be able to enjoy the services they want to enjoy. But in reality, he's the main advocate for wanting the removal of all the rules that guarantee those things. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ian, at the beginning you asked this question whether or not net neutrality should be brought back. That, of course, raises this as a policy question. You don't really tell us what your position is, which I think creates a little bit of ambiguity. Later on, you do seem to suggest that there is a need for net neutrality, that the loss of net neutrality is going to be harmful. That's your proposition, and I think that that should be a lot clearer at the beginning of the speech. You do kind of introduce the subject by talking about what some of the potential threats are there, some of which don't get defined as clearly as the concept of net neutrality, and since that's going to be one of the justifications for having net neutrality, you probably should spend a little bit more time on some of those things. The trafficking thing in particular is the thing that I thought you needed a little work on. Later on in the speech, I think there's some explanation. All right, then it appears that there is a preview of the supporting structure. There's no numerical signposts on those points, but it sounded to me like there was, in fact, a layout of what the main points were going to be. Now, in the first, when you get to the body of the speech, I didn't really know that you were talking about that first point. You kind of get involved in talking about Pi and how he is in favor of getting rid of net neutrality and what his arguments are, and he provides some information. I'm going, okay, well, here's a lot of argument about this person and why they are saying that we don't need net neutrality. I'm going, and when's the part that you're going to show us that net neutrality is essential? That seems a little strange that you spent all this time on this. If you think that he is biased, if you think he's captured by the industry, if you think that there's something untoward going on here, I think you should make a claim like that and say that the head of the SEC, who is in favor of doing this, has reached this conclusion based on bad information or based on a economic bias that he has rather than what is in the best interest of consumers. As it is, it sounds to me like you're just telling us, well, here's what his claim is, and I've heard his claim, and I'm waiting for you to tell me something different. Like when you say he challenged the lack of examples for net neutrality. He says there are billions of dollars decreased in investment. You say, well, he doesn't provide any examples of that. I'm going, and where are your examples of this trafficking, of this redirection, of this blocking that you're talking about? Because that's the standard that you want me to judge by, and I'm not getting any of that information in your presentation. So that needs to be something that is addressed also. You get to your second point really late in the speech, so you're down, like with maybe a minute to go in the amount of time that you have to speak. That's when you start that second point about the small businesses. And there's a lot of assertions there. You're very dependent on hypothetical examples on these points. If there's an example of businesses that have had these sorts of things happen to them before net neutrality was in place or since it's been repealed, it would be great for you to point to those examples and use them, because that would fit the argument and especially the narrative that you set up earlier. And then we could say that this really seems tangible and real. You get to your third point basically right after you've run out of time, and you don't really actually it's like a minute after you ran out of time, and I don't think you really get much chance to develop it, so that's a little bit problematic. I heard two source citations in the presentation. One was the New York Times talking about in other countries they're splitting these things up and it's bundling, and I'm going, okay, where's the argument that says this is harmful or that this is a problem, that this will be something that's bad? If you're not somebody who uses Netflix and YouTube, and all you need the internet for is email and to be able to visit a website to buy something, for instance, then why am I having to pay for everybody else being carried on that service? That's probably the argument on the other side that says, yeah, let's split it up. It's kind of like the cable argument that I hear all the time. People hate cable because I have to pay for stuff that I don't watch because it all comes together. You pay one fee and you get 200 channels. If you want extra, you pay for the premium services, but I'm still paying for, I got to be honest with you, 150 channels that I never look at, 25 channels that I look at once a year, and the truth is I watch 4 or 5 of those cable channels on a regular basis, but I have to pay for everything else. And I think that's the argument that the other side would be saying about this. And when you say they bundle that, I'm going, well, sounds like a deal to me. Then I don't have to pay for crap that I don't want. And you should tell us, since you've said that this is something that's happening in other parts of the world, so what happens there? Is there some negative consequence? Like the thing that you're talking about, do businesses run into these kinds of problems? Has the cost gone up to consumers? That's a place where I think you could find some information that would really support your argument a little bit more. I thought that you did a pretty nice job speaking to us, but because you're so dependent on hypotheticals and you kind of challenge the lack of specificity from the one guy on the other side, that it makes it kind of a wash in terms of being convincing. I'm not sure that I have a sufficient amount of information to reach the conclusion that you want us to agree to. All right, thank you.